Hi, and welcome to our new episode. Is the quest for love a wasted effort? And as we said, like the Beatles sang, all you need is love. In this episode, we'll explore love on a different level, a challenge perhaps to your notion of love, and one that can free you to new levels of joy and satisfaction in your life. Margaret Laird wrote in Government is Self-Government, the message of truth is love, the science which liberates humanity from conditioned thinking to demonstrate the infinitude of good or God in every incident of daily life. All learning is self-learning. In the being of yourself, the conscious infinitude of existence, you are. Being, living, whole, one. You're thinking you are your world. Hi, Betty. How you doing today?
Pretty good.
Excellent. Anything you want to add for our subject tonight before we continue?
Well, there's just a lot of good things that Mrs. Laird wrote in Gov't on the subject of love. It's really more than we can share in this program. So it's worthwhile to get hold of the book and read it, but it's good stuff. She says, for instance, love living provides the climate, the soil, and all that is needful for individual self-fulfillment.
Right. So that's very good. So we're going to dive into this subject, explore it more. Before we do, I want to give a nod to the Institute of Metaphysical Science, who sponsors these live stream events, established in 1959 as the Margaret Laird Foundation, researching, exploring, living, and teaching the science of being and the causal nature of consciousness. The website's at www.scientificmetaphysics.org. And again, this episode is based off of Margaret Laird's book, Gov't is Self-Government, and that's available at the website as well for those of you who are interested. Today's episode is the quest for love. Is the quest for love a wasted effort? It's a great question, right? So without any further ado, let's jump into our first quote. So in Gov't is Self-Government on page 73, starting on page 73, Margaret Laird wrote, "Love is the good sense never to look outside of consciousness for what we want, nor for the cause and cure of our ills. There is no living outside of one's own thinking being."
Yeah. It's interesting that she says the cause and the cure are all in the love that's being you at the moment.
Right. And I also like this quote, which is, "Love is that which makes us unhappy with less than all."
Yeah.
And that's love. Love is what makes us unhappy with less than all.
Yeah.
So if you've got a problem or a situation in your life and you don't like it, that's the view that love supplies. And you could call it a swift kick in the butt.
Well, you could say it that way, but it's like you're kicking yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Because it's the love that you're living that makes the difference, or the lack thereof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then go on to say, love never asks why. Right? And with love as one's life principle, living's natural, original, spontaneous, and imaginative. So that sets us the tone. So when you're looking in your life for love, you could say you're looking for love in all the wrong places, just to go along with our song kind of metaphor here. But you could say you're looking for love in all the wrong places if you're looking over there in your life for love.
Yep.
Okay.
It's like looking for your hand over there somewhere.
Right, exactly. Where is it? I can't find it. Oh, it's right here.
Yeah, it's right where you are.
Right.
Because it's constitutional.
Right.
You know, it's in metaphysical science, it's a synonym for the God idea. Mm-hmm. So wherever the God idea is is love.
Yes.
And since all existence is reflectively the action of the God idea, love is everywhere that you are.
Yeah.
It's constitutional of your being.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
And
interesting.
that's a different sense of love than the human picture.
Right. And
And
that's
yet
the
love,
distinction that we want to draw. Go ahead.
yeah, but the human picture of love wouldn't exist either if love were not present, constituting every moment.
Right. But in the human experience, you've got
It's a
love
few.
and not love, the look of love and not love, because
Yeah.
one defines the other. And that's the paradox of human living. But
Good.
if that's where you're looking for love, that's the part that's the booby trap.
Yep.
All right. In Science and Health on page 13 and page 68, Mary Baker Eddy said, love is impartial and universal in its adaptation and bestowals. Science presents unfoldment, not accretion.
Yeah.
Can you define accretion?
Yeah, it's like an acquirement.
Okay, so I have to acquire it or attain it?
Yeah, you don't have to go anywhere for it.
Right, so we're saying presents unfoldment, it just unfolds.
It's present, always
In your
present.
own being, right. Okay. And then, of course, in here, the other thing that gets said that look at with love is that love is equally indifferent to praise or blame, to love or hatred.
Well, it's like you're talking about something like the air we breathe. It's pretty indifferent to whether we're mad or smiling.
Right.
It's present no matter what.
And we could say that's love. The same is true with love.
It's similar. That's right.
It's a ground of being.
Yep. It's the ever-present reality of constitutional stuff.
Yeah. And here's another one to consider too that's really good. Love does not mean doing for others, but is the awareness which lives its others as itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you are the world you walk through.
Yep.
And love is present.
Yep.
Whether you perceive it or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And in Mind is the Athlete on page 157, you said, love is the awareness that only perfection is present. Accurate acknowledgement of cause has the individual immediately on the edge of possibility.
Yeah, and another quote that I ran into from Mrs. Eddy in Miscellaneous Writing says that perfection, the perfection of man is intact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a universal truth, despite whatever pictures you're holding of yourself.
Right.
The being of you is always intact.
Yeah. Yeah. And another statement as we go through this is it's a wonderful thing to discover, even if this discovering entails suffering, that the need to love and be loved is supplied by one's own love, capital L.
Yeah, it looks like something out there. And that's the language world appearing in the way we can see it.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's always present.
Yeah.
It's never out there coming to you. You're always constituted of the love that when you acknowledge it is experienced.
Right.
When you don't acknowledge it, you wonder where it is.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're liking this conversation, you can do a thumbs up or a heart or, in Facebook or YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would be awesome. And if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and leave it in the comments area on either YouTube or Facebook, and we will get those comments and include them during this session. So just wanted to invite you to also participate as fully as you would like. All right, moving to the next quote. In Government is Self-Government, Margaret Laird writes, perception, awareness, one's own thinking is reception, what is seen, heard, and felt. The act of perception is the act of creating.
Yeah.
So you have, so is it like this? You have, there is what's so, and we have our point of view about what's so, or we have, but our point of view is what we have to say about what we see or what we feel or what we taste, what we touch, the human language picture.
I don't know what you mean by what we
in
say.
that, well, in that, there's all kinds of being clear about the facts of being.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, we don't have to rearrange the furniture. We don't have to get things to look the way we want. We don't have to effort and struggle around that.
No, you don't have to. But when you do effort and struggle, it's because you're not allowing the fact of being to appear constitutional for yourself. You would rather see it out there somewhere. And so it will always look a little remote, be a little harder to recognize, be not as count onable.
Okay.
Is when you recognize that every single minute particle of being is present when you show up, and it's whole and perfect and constituted of love.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't have to seek it. You know, I'm going back to the title we had here, the quest for love.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a wasted effort, but if you are on a quest for love, it indicates that you are starved for the fact of yourself. You aren't in touch with what's really true about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like wandering in the desert without water.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the same thing as you can go east and there's always more east to go? And all you have to get as far east as you can go, all you have to do is turn around.
Yeah, and that experience of turning around and being as far east as you can go is exactly perfect for what we're talking about. When you acknowledge divine love as the presence constituting all being, you have turned around and you're fully there.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go anywhere. It's present, like right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's always a right now thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health on page 68 said, proportionately, as human generation ceases, the unbroken links of eternal harmonious being will be spiritually discerned, and man, not of the earthly, but coexistent with God, will appear.
Yeah, that sort of speaks to your constancy or your consistent acknowledgement. It's proportionate to your willingness to acknowledge the facts of being,
Mm-hmm.
that your experience will mirror the facts.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So your experience will mirror the facts.
Yeah. The facts present.
Okay.
Which have you show up.
Right. And even if you don't like it.
Yeah. Or even if you're not aware of it, it's showing up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Whether you're consciously aware or not.
Yeah.
It's operational. Okay. And in Mind is the Athlete on page 157, you wrote, Unself Love is the power of being, and is devoid of human attachment. In living your others as your discovered and acknowledged divine self, Unself Love defines your presence.
Yeah.
Say that, like unpack that a little bit.
Well, unself love is, I guess, a term that Mrs. Eddy and Margaret both used, referring to perfect love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's attached to who you think you are, if you think you're loving or someone is being loving to you, then you've got love split up. And it's really just a perception of love rather than love itself. It's a concept of love.
Right.
So if you are living the acknowledgement that all is divine love, you will have a freedom from the belief of yourself as a two-legged animal. You know, we say there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Well, love would be that divinity. Life is that divinity. Truth is that divinity. But when you're acknowledging the facts of being, the realm of reality is present, and your experience kind of flips over from what it might otherwise be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
a great freedom of presence and of joy and of responsibility and of aliveness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could get that. And then on page 74, Margaret Laird wrote, love is the self-discovery or breakthrough that all the others, quote unquote, others in one's world are not others, but one's own self-conscious infinitude.
Okay.
And as conscious identity, I am the one that is love, capital L, providing the environment for individual self-growth or unfoldment of my others, which I also think is interesting. So you have the world in proportion, you know, the world and freedom in your others.
World.
Yeah, in proportion to your knowledge of the facts and your willingness to allow it to be.
Yeah. And you know, you can intellectually know the facts.
Oh, yeah.
But when the intellectual is in charge, there's very little willingness.
Right.
There's like a self-righteousness.
Okay.
That really interrupts your experience of freedom.
Right. Right.
You know, and somewhere on page 75, she says, there's no living outside of one's own thinking being.
Right.
So you're always living within the thinking you are being. It's not I can't think of a good word for that. Life is really an unfoldment. It's a revelation, a revealing. Perfection and all that includes is what's present when you show up.
Right.
How much of it you live consciously determines the quality of your experience in human living.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Now, in Government is Self-Government on page 76, Margaret Laird wrote, self-conscious living of individual divineness is the solution to every problem and the supplying of every want. One lives by grace, not deeds of righteousness or right thinking. Grace resolves I want into I am.
Yep.
And that is, let's see. Yeah, so it's by the grace of God, go I. Look, and wasn't that?
But for the grace of God,
There you go. But for the grace of God, go I.
Yep.
All right. Okay, and in Science and Health on page 69, Mary Baker Eddy wrote, the scientific fact that man and the universe are evolved from spirit, and so are spiritual, is as fixed in divine science as is the proof that mortals gain the sense of health only as they lose the sense of sin and disease.
Yeah. I have to really be willing, I can say it this way maybe, to be absent from my conviction that it's all out there somewhere.
Right.
I have to leave that alone and say, well, maybe so, maybe not.
Right.
But the fact is that there isn't anything out there. You know, I repeat this again because I've said it before, but physicists have already proved that what I observe doesn't really exist until I observe it. So
Right.
it is up to me to live myself with freedom. It isn't going to be handed to me on a platter.
Right.
To live myself with abundance, the same thing. To live myself with joy, same thing.
Right.
To live myself with all that you could ever want and desire. It all occurs out of who you are being from moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and on and on and on.
Right.
So at any moment at all, I can immediately step out of the language picture that I keep using to define reality for myself. Just step out of it for a second and be willing to see that divine love is the presence that has me walking whatever path I'm walking.
Mm-hmm.
And that divine love is my own divine being that has Betty show up doing whatever she's doing.
Right.
It's the release from the personal attachment to the way it looks that gives you the freedom to be all that you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Mind is the Athlete on page 159, you say, the self-aware individual finds himself less and less attached to identity forms, but can allow them to be just as they are and just as they're not, regardless of their appearance in daily experience.
Yeah. I know that the way it looks is never the way it is. So I can say to myself a million times a day, and I do quite often, that may be the way it looks. Now, what's the way that it is? And I have to go back to the facts of being and be willing for that to be true. You know how difficult it is, for instance, if I break my arm or stub my toe or anything like that, and the sense of pain and discomfort and so on. And you tend to think, why me? What did I do to deserve that? Well, I didn't do anything to deserve it. I generated it out of being something that I'm not. And the something that I am is not putting up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that I learn to let go of it is because it hurts. So it's a divine hurt.
Right.
And I can let go of it and say, I don't want to be that. What am I? And who am I? And where am I? And how am I? And when I begin to step in line with the facts of being, the whole thing shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple things that I want to highlight, and that is reality is not humanly observable. Reality with a capital R is not humanly observable.
That's right.
What
Whatever
human
I can
beings,
observe is language.
that's right. What human beings observe is their own perception and belief of reality presencing. And as long as you're looking in the picture out there for that, in the belief picture, the perception, for cause, for something that's lacking, you're in the language world.
Right.
You're not consciously self-aware.
Yep.
And then each one's language world reports conscious perception accurately. It's the only way you can see it for what there is to learn. Sometimes I hate this, but the fact is that it looks the way it looks because there's something there getting your attention. And the more you play in the look, like there's cause somewhere in that, you got to rearrange it. You're just expanding in the pain. You're expanding in the problem. Or what would be called expanding in the negative.
Uh-huh. One of
right?
Margaret's favorite phrases.
Exactly. We just had a conversation about this yesterday. But that would be expanding in the negative. And each one's language world reports conscious perception accurately. It's the only way you can see it based on what there is to learn, to discover, to live, and to live freely. And so the only thing there is to do is acknowledge the facts rather than playing in the fiction. And when you can do that, when you get enough of all the crap so that you can say, okay, I give, I don't know. Now you're free. Now you're free. And look at what that has brought to you in your own expansion of yourself, in your willingness to let things be.
Right. And it's never the saying of anything. Like I can say, I give up, but I don't really, you know.
Right.
And so nothing happens. I think, oh, that didn't work, you know. It's who you're being. If I'm being absolutely at the end of my rope with what I've been observing, and I just, you know, I just give up. I can't figure that thing out. Nothing I do is going to make a difference.
Yeah.
That at that point, you see the divinity that is present. Then, and it's always present, you know. Your divinity is as present as the Betty look.
Yeah.
You just don't see it because it's not a 3D object.
Right.
But at the moment that the 3D object steps aside and says, I give up, I can't figure this out, the divinity is right there with the entire answer.
Yep.
And things shift when that occurs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And problems arise, said another way, problems arise only in our failure to read the language accurately.
Yep.
So the cause is never in the language.
Mm-hmm.
What there is to fix is never in the language. There's only acknowledgement of being, of truth, of love present, even when you don't see that it's present, because that's, you'll never see reality. Human beings do not see reality. It's not humanly observable.
Yeah, and there's only one being. So there's not a million of them that I can say, well, now let's see. I don't want to be that one today. I want to be that one.
Right.
Being is one presence, yes. Universally present, constant,
right?
You know, absolute, perfect. And it's always, always, always constitutional.
Right.
So I stand in perfection whenever I have a moment of reality present.
Right. And in, Sandra Jackson says, in Apotheosis, Now Yan Hao Hong said, stay with the facts and not the idea.
Well, science uses the word idea a little differently than that, Sandra. I know what he's saying, and we get the picture of what he means. But idea is what's constitutional. Idea constitutes everything that is seen, heard, felt, and all beyond that. Everything is idea expression. The way it looks is a point of view.
Right.
The way it is idea present.
Yeah.
Whole, perfect, complete.
Very good.
Thank you for sharing, Sandra.
Yes. And here's the biggie. Devotion of thought wins the day.
Yeah, it does.
Wherever you focus, it wins the day.
Whatever you're devoted to is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
If you're devoted to something very personal, very limited, then don't be surprised when your experience of living becomes very limited and very personal.
Right. Yep.
And if you want that to not hound you, you'll take a look at who you're being that moment.
Yeah.
And just step out of it. Oh, wait a minute. All is infinite mind, devotion of thought. Aha, It's not a personal thing I do. It's
Right.
something that constitutes me, and it's divine and whole and perfect now.
Yep. And as much as I want to wrestle with stuff and kind of fix the picture and be up in arms and all that stuff, there's true peace and joy by letting it be.
Yeah.
And then whole new whats show up that I couldn't even see before. Happens every time.
Yeah, there's a story in this chapter that we've just talked about where somebody had lost something, and they searched everywhere for it. I mean, thoroughly searched it, and they didn't find it. And eventually they found it in the very place that they had thoroughly searched before. And Mrs. Laird had maybe I can find it, but she said the most strange, this is most strange because for hours we've been combing that particular place and found nothing. Not strange, says Mrs. Laird. What you lost was not there until it was located here as conscious identity, yourself. So don't be surprised when that happens either.
Right. All right. So that's it. And what?
Have we got another minute?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just feel like we need to really take on this word called sin. It's come up a couple of times this week for me in phone calls and stuff. And sin is not something you do or commit. Sin is the belief that there's more than one thing going on ever. Anytime I buy the belief that there's a million things bothering me, anytime I think that there's 15 problems instead of one, I'm way off in left field. And that's the only sin there ever is, the belief that there's more than one thing going on. And the one thing going on is always perfection. Now, the way I see it gives me a problem, maybe, but what's actually present is perfection. One infinite mind, infinitely manifest right here, right now, constituting everything there is, including the Betty. And when I can get to that, I don't have to be concerned about sin, quote unquote.
Yes. So pay attention to where you're ascribing cause.
Yep, exactly. Thank you.
And be willing to have things look exactly as they look and keep walking on. So we won't be doing this again next week. We're going to skip a week and we'll be back on the 31st of May.
There's some traveling going on next week.
That's right. So 2 weeks until the next episode. And until then, catch up on the past episodes. And we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.